and it's a huge privilege considering what's going on, the genocide in Gaza, for all of us to be in a safe space where we have food on our table. I usually do not like to, attach myself to organizations. I like more of, less institutional attachment. And I'm gonna try really quickly to tell you about feminism in Palestine, which we might not call feminism. Maybe we stand together as women and possibly men, because we need also men in the movement. Um, and one of the ways we do that is by telling stories. You all know Bisan Ouda, right? The journalist from Gaza. So Bisan today, she shared a video where she talked about International Women's Day. And what struck me there is when she said, oh, where is the dignity in the world we live in, and how can we survive as women, men, and children, and youth and elderly in the Gaza Strip? And all these conventions, all these international law doesn't really mean anything for her. And the main thing for her was to call for a ceasefire and safety for everyone. And I think this is the strongest message we can have for International Women's Day. There are a lot of women. One of the women I came across as a volunteer in a local youth group in my hometown, she's called Aisha Ouda. I wanted to shed light about her experience, and especially in connection with Bisan, because Bisan talked about international law. And if you come across Aisha's work, she wrote books about her experience in Israeli military jails, and she was in jail for 10 years for her activism. And she talked about international law back in the late 60s and early 70s. And as I worked in feminist organizations, I was like, oh my God, this is, not new. This is something that women all the time talked about, but unfortunately, it didn't allow us enough dignity or safety in our homeland. And Aisha, going back to the local initiative, we do like a series of talks as part of community education, what we call community education. And we did a series of talks where we invite former prisoners. And Aisha is someone who doesn't like to call themselves a former prisoner. She's like, I'm a writer, I'm a free person. And it was such an insightful experience. And this is one example. Another example we did was, I'm sure you all know about Munal Kurd, who is a young woman who grew up in Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem, and she led the campaign to save the neighborhood from ethnic cleansing and from Palestinians getting expelled by the Israeli regime. So that was another example we did. I was going to show you a picture of a women's march that was back in 2019. And one of the great experiences we had back then is by a movement called Tal'at. And what is really interesting about this movement was it was a call by Palestinian women inside historic Palestine and in diaspora. So a lot of women networked and got together around the issues of violence, whether by the occupation or by patriarchy. And we had different signs at the demonstrations about the female prisoners who are in military jails. We had pictures of women who were murdered sadly in the not only by the occupation but also by in the Palestinian society. And we were coming together to say that all these issues are connected, and much of the violence that's reflected in Palestinian society is a result of what we see of colonial violence. And there's, if you're interested, there's academic paper about that. You can go and see more. And yeah, but I mean, I can't help but also like always get back to Gazan women, because women inspired us. And one of the people who really inspired me recently was a friend, my friend Dina Dalloul, who is a dear friend, and also someone I met at Goldsmiths, where we both studied. And it's interesting to meet someone from your own country in London, and you're not able to see them in Palestine. And Dina is pregnant, and she's 8 months pregnant, nearly giving birth, and she's trying to escape from Gaza. Nadine, I'm trying to escape, but I can't post publicly on my social media because it's very controversial topic, and I'm worried that I will make other Gazans unhappy because I have the privilege to leave. And this is something that really touched me, thinking that with everything that she has been through, and the genocide and the war and lack of resources, and she didn't see a doctor for several months, for months for her baby. And then she was like, I don't want to hurt anyone, especially that it's not easy to leave Gaza. So that was, Dina's story. You all remember the Great Return March, which is completely forgotten, and everyone here in the West, they're like, violence, violence, and then we forget about the peaceful marches that people called for in Gaza to return to their homes. And during my work at a feminist organization in Palestine, we used to document testimonies from women in the Great Return March. And the amount of hidden stories you hear about from women is unbelievable. And much of the time, women, it's like I said, it's a privilege to be here and talk. And much of the time, women in Gaza cannot express how they feel. And in the reports and in the fact sheet that we did, we could see the mental effect on women in Gaza. And they're worried that they became breadwinners in the house because they lost their fathers or their brothers or their husbands or whatever. And they're worried about caring for children with who lost their limbs even back then in the march. So yeah, that was a teeny little bit about that. And what really inspired me back then is our work with counselors. We worked with several locations around Palestine, mainly in Gaza and the West Bank. And counselors from Gaza are mostly the ones who gave us inspiration and hope, even during the hard times. And especially when I worked back then, it was in 2021, and the assaults were going on Gaza as well. For an end note, I want to say that feminism is just being human, and it doesn't have to be a big deal. It's just showing solidarity with your sisters around the world. And I have many women from different backgrounds who I'm friends with, and I'm grateful for their solidarity. So yeah, it is simple, and it is something we discussed in our local groups in Palestine, where I volunteered as well. And we discussed this idea of do we need feminism, what is it, and how do we define it locally.